cité fédération anglophone met le reste dans l'intégrité territoriale du Cameroun. Ça donne beaucoup de problèmes.
We understand.
58 schools have been destroyed. 47 political leaders are being held without charge. The recent Amnesty report refers to, quote, arbitrary arrests, torture, unlawful killings, and the destruction of property. The Catholic Bishops' Conference has called it, quote, inhuman, blind, monstrous violence. And of the October election, Archbishop Samuel Cleader, the president of the Bishops' Conference, says one has the impression election results are decided before voting takes place. My lords, we can all share in these horrendous statistics, but what I want to do is this evening focus on what conclusions we can draw from. More than ever, with Britain's potential departure from the European Union, we must seek to define our role in the world. And it would be helpful to know from the Noble Baroness the Minister whether, for instance, human rights issues were assessed before, for instance, the New Age natural gas deal was announced, what consideration has been given to targeted sanctions, and whether this crisis figures in the Foreign Secretary's recent commitment on atrocity prevention. Sides. Too often in the past, in Bosnia, in Rwanda, in Darfur, the United Kingdom chose the path of moral equivalence, hinting that both sides were as bad as each other is the easy way out. In a previous generation, this was known as appeasement. Moral equivalence signals that we cannot be expected to pass judgment on which side is more to blame for the conflict. Instead, we issue the usual calls for a cessation of violence and a negotiated settlement, or we frame political conflicts as if they were natural disasters requiring aid, and we're very generous at sending aid rather than political solutions. At its worst, by repressive protesters' hatreds, we absolve ourselves of the obligation under international law to stop the killing. It's also disingenuous to defend our tepid response by claiming that the circumstances present us with a simple binary choice between wringing our hands in dismay or putting British boots on the ground. This is to ignore the potential for soft power available to the international community, be it warning, but we chose not to listen to Cameroon's Anglophone minority. Anglophones represent 20% of the population, but for years there was only one Anglophone member of the 36-person cabinet in Yaoundé, just one example of their systematic marginalisation. My lords, we shouldn't underestimate the influence we have, but it speaks volumes that we left it to the American ambassador to express his disapproval of the Cameroonian government, has ignored the pleas of moderate representatives of civil society, such as church leaders. Calls for a federal solution were ignored by President Biya, 36 years in power, fueling the calls for secession and thereby polarising opinion, and sent Francophone teachers speaking French into English schools. They responded to peaceful protest with disproportionate force. The International Crisis Group reports that a government helicopter, for instance, hovered outside a church, shooting Anglophone worshippers as they emerged from Mass. Inevitably, disproportionate actions led to the current escalation. In the face of all this, my lords, there is nothing admirable about being even-handed in the face of the suffering of the Anglophone leaders in seeking genuine and inclusive talks. We need a targeted strategy for atrocity prevention and, my lords, a commitment to bring to justice those responsible for human rights violations wherever they occur.
My Lords, I too would like to thank my noble friend Lord Boateng for initiating this debate and too for his passionate introduction. I don't do the complex and contested decolonisation process that he referred to, but as my noble friend Lord McConnell highlighted, particularly since the federal arrangements were scrapped in '72, the English-speaking Cameroonians have complained bitterly that they are politically, economically and linguistically marginalised. And of course the current period of escalating violence and displacement goes back to when lawyers protested
Our previous speaker from the UK Member of Parliament has spoken. However, the key question is, how do we move forward? British government, their reason was no taxation without a representation. The question, the validity of the claim of the UK government over the people of the United States. It was a distant government controlling a foreign people of the United States. And the United States fought and said no to colonialism, no to the sovereignty of the people of the United States. The people of the United States had the ability to govern itself. And that is not different from the people of Southern Cameroon asking similar. So imagine the people of Southern Cameroon were asking for freedom. Freedom, demonstrating for a freedom. Instead of La Republique du Cameroun, instead of Cameroon du Cameroon, call the people, the citizens of Southern Cameroon, to debate on issues how to move forward. Instead, they declare war on the people of Southern Cameroon and send its military force to brutalize our citizens. That was in 2016. Simply demonstrate authority over the people of Southern Cameroon. La Republique has zero authority.
On the Anglophone people.
Anglophone mental arrest, down integrity, territorial autonomy.
If you understand.
58 schools being destroyed. 47 political leaders are being held without charge. The recent amnesty report refers to arbitrary arrests, torture, unlawful killings, and the destruction of property.
Leaders of this world fail to yield to do the right thing. Of course, United States, but it is a sad news that United States don't even have the power to execute the policy of the United States. But however, that is not the question. But the sovereignty of the people of Southern Cameroon is the key factor. Recognize the people of Southern Cameroon and ask La Republique du Cameroon to move out of Southern Cameroon territory. Governor, colonial divisional officer, all its colonial affairs, Jongu Endele, Jongu Foncha, and Joa were exemplary executive leaders of the Southern Cameroon. La Republique has no one to enlist it, that they have fully transferred power from the next to the next. But from one brutal regime to the next brutal regime, from one brutal regime to the next brutal regime. Their right was deprived by the Great British government on the false assumption that the people of Southern Cameroon should remain under the umbrella of a foreign brutal regime that is so controlled by France. They have no access to any means to determine their future. Imagine, France is persuading the son of a brutal dictator that has been in power for 39 years to succeed him. So, France can have access to the mirror of Africa to feed the people of France. Our people will not be part of this business. United States recognize the people of Southern Cameroon, their right and privilege, and let them start from zero. In fact, the United States provide money to build the Bambali University, and he to deprive the people of Southern Cameroon, use that money to construct the natural seaport in Victoria. That was deprived of the late Commerce Secretary. That was deprived from the people of Southern Cameroon. In fact, Fonjindam, the initiator of Chantier Navarre for the construction, was immediately sentenced to 15 years and later on sentenced life imprisonment for doing good thing for the good area of Southern Cameroon. How much can I enlist for the continued injustice besides what the United States knows about the injustice in the people of Southern Cameroon? We have got enough of this and we are ready to move forward. Recognize the people of Southern Cameroon is the key indicator moving forward. United States, do good for the greatest number.
Spécial qui reconnaît la spécificité de la zone anglophone, mais elle reste dans l'intégrité territoriale du Cameroun.
Institutions that weren't really doing anything to bring the two sides together. Because, frankly, the possibility of sanctions is always there. But it's always better to work
in what place in the world I think it's time to recognize the people of Southern Cameroon to move forward.
We understand.
Cessation of violence or international justice. The grievances fueling the violence in Cameroon did not erupt overnight. We had plenty of warning, but we chose not to listen to Cameroon's Anglophone minority. Anglophones represent 20% of the population, but for years there was only one Anglophone member of the 36-person cabinet in Yaoundé, just one example of their systematic marginalisation. My lords, we shouldn't underestimate the influence we have, but it speaks volumes that we left it to the American ambassador to express his disapproval of the Cameroonian government's brutal response to peaceful protests. For decades, the Francophone government has ignored the pleas of moderate representatives of civil society, such as church leaders. Calls for a federal 36 years in power, fueling the calls for secession and thereby polarising opinion. Breaking point came when the Francophone government sought to impose French laws in schools. They received a government helicopter, for instance, hovered outside a church, shooting Anglophone worshippers as they emerged from Mass. Inevitably, disproportionate actions led to the current escalation. In the face of all this, my lords, there is nothing admirable about being even-handed in the face of the suffering of the Anglophone community. The United Kingdom should...
Today, on 24th, Seven Canadians will be
this morning did a very good job of explaining the
today,
history
on
of how we got to the point where we are today.
5 months,
In October 2017, when it came kind of to a head, the England issues there with atrocities, issues with allegations of law of war issues, and this is something that brings all 34 assistance programs. Right before the election in October.
Wow, that's a great day. That's a great day. That's a great day. That's a great record of our law. That's the cast standing there. No mercy. That's the record of our law. Let our law suffer. This is the only final. There's a final call. Now what it is.
Continue with them, all kind of small engagements as well as exercises. We did have we talked about the state partnership program with Nebraska. We put that on hold. The ambassador put a halt to that. So the bottom line is right now in Cameroon, they have been a good partner with us counterterrorism-wise, but you can't neglect the fact that they have there are alleged atrocities and what's going on there. And so we continue to take our case. It could have a significant impact on our ability to work. Right.